The chandeliers above the Black Ridge Ballroom glowed like frozen suns, casting warm light over silk gowns, tailored suits, and faces trained to smile without effort. The air smelled of champagne, perfume, and quiet power. It was the kind of place where nothing was meant to go wrong. That was why no one noticed Lena Moore struggling to breathe. At first, it was subtle, a tightening in her chest, a shallow inhale that never quite reached her lungs. She told herself it was nerves, the crowd, the heat. She had learned long ago how to endure discomfort in silence, how to stand still while something invisible pressed in on her. But the corset beneath her blouse was tighter than she remembered. Each breath grew shorter, each second heavier. The room blurred at the edges. She shifted her weight, steadying herself with a glass of champagne she hadn't touched. Her smile stayed in place, perfectly practiced, even as panic began to rise. No one here knew her well enough to notice the signs, and she refused to give them a reason to look closer. Then the space beside her changed. She felt it before she saw him. A presence calm enough to cut through the noise, close enough to break her fragile sense of control. When she turned her head, she found herself looking at a man she had never seen before, and would not forget. He was young, sharply dressed, his posture relaxed but alert, as though the entire room belonged to him without effort. His gaze didn't linger on her face or her body the way other men's often did. Instead, it dropped briefly to her chest, then returned to her eyes with unsettling clarity. He noticed. The moment stretched. The music seemed to fade. The pressure in her chest spiked, sharp and sudden, and she swayed just slightly, enough for him to react. He moved without drawing attention, guiding her away from the center of the ballroom toward the shadow of a marble column. His movements were efficient, controlled, and practiced, as if he had done this before. As if he knew exactly how close to stand without touching her. In a single, precise motion, he loosened the hidden lacing beneath her blouse. The tension released instantly. Air flooded her lungs. Lena gasped, the sound raw and unguarded, and for a moment she didn't care who heard. Her knees trembled as the world snapped back into focus. The music returned. The laughter resumed. No one noticed what had almost happened, except him. He stepped back as soon as she was steady, already scanning the room with quiet intensity. The relief she felt was immediate, and followed closely by something else. Confusion, fear, curiosity. She had been seen. As her breathing slowed, she realized how close she had come to collapsing in front of people who would have remembered her weakness far longer than her elegance. She also realized that the man who had saved her had done so without spectacle, apology, or expectation. Before she could gather her thoughts, he was gone, absorbed into the crowd as if he had never been there at all. It wasn't until minutes later that she began to hear his name. It surfaced in whispers, passed between clusters of guests who knew more than they said. The way people stiffened when they noticed him across the room. The way conversations stopped when he passed too close. Joon Park. The name carried weight. Not celebrity, not respect. Something heavier. Something edged with fear. Lena watched from a distance as people made space for him without being asked. She noticed how security shifted subtly in his presence, how eyes followed him while pretending not to. This wasn't the influence of wealth alone. This was authority earned in places that never made it into polite conversation. She should have left. Every instinct she had developed over years of survival told her to disappear quietly while she still could. but the pull of unanswered questions kept her rooted in place. Later, she found him on the terrace overlooking the river, standing alone with the city lights reflecting off dark water below. The wind lifted the edges of his coat, but he didn't seem to feel the cold. He looked like a man carrying too much responsibility in a body too young for it. From that distance, he seemed almost ordinary. Up close, she sensed the restraint beneath the calm, a discipline forged by necessity, not choice. She didn't know why she trusted him enough to approach. Perhaps it was because he had given her air without asking for anything in return. Perhaps it was because he had seen her at her weakest and had chosen discretion over power. As the night deepened, fragments of truth surfaced, not spoken, but revealed in the careful way he carried himself. He was not a man driven by excess. He did not indulge in chaos. Whatever world he belonged to, it followed rules, boundaries, a moral code carved from hard experience. And yet, there was bitterness beneath the surface, a quiet grief for a life that had gone in a different direction. Lena sensed it the way one recognizes familiar pain in another person. Without needing it explained, her own past pressed in on her then. Memories of control disguised as care, of being told how to stand, how to breathe, how to exist without taking up space. She had escaped that life piece by piece, rebuilding herself with caution and distance. She had promised never to belong to anyone again. And yet, standing near Joon Park, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Understood. The night ended without promises or plans. They went their separate ways, the encounter already settling into her memory as something unreal, something dangerous to revisit. But fate had not finished with her. Later, as her car slowed at a red light on an empty stretch of road, Lena noticed the shadows moving too deliberately at the edges of her vision. The driver stiffened. Her pulse spiked. Then a black sedan pulled alongside them, matching speed with quiet precision. The window lowered, and in the reflection of the glass, she saw him again. The black sedan slid into position beside her car, the hum of its engine almost imperceptible against the quiet night. Lena's heart raced as instinct screamed that she had nowhere to hide. The reflection in the window confirmed what she feared, and paradoxically, what she wanted to see. He was there, calm, controlled. Every line of his body radiated precision and authority. It was impossible not to be drawn to him, even in this moment of raw fear. The sedan's door opened before anyone could react. Joon Park, the man who had observed her breath and saved her from collapsing in the ballroom, was suddenly beside her, moving with the effortless efficiency of someone accustomed to danger. Without hesitation, he guided her into the back seat, the vehicle sliding silently away from the empty street. For several minutes, neither spoke. The city lights blurred past like streaks of gold and silver, and Lena's pulse slowly returned to a steady rhythm. She tried to process the night, the gala, the suffocating corset, the intervention, and now this strange and terrifying rescue. But the more she tried, the more questions surfaced. Who was he really? Why had he saved her? And why did she feel a strange comfort in his presence, despite the danger? Eventually, the sedan slowed outside a tall, unmarked building in Riverton's quieter district. It was elegant but understated, more fortress than home, its presence blending seamlessly with the night. Joon guided her inside, moving silently as if every step had been practiced 1,000 times. Lena noticed the subtle security measures, the cameras, the guarded entrances, and the way even the shadows seemed to obey an unseen order. Once inside, the atmosphere changed. The intensity of the outside world lifted slightly, leaving only a quiet tension in its place. Lena could finally breathe fully, but the air was heavy with unspoken truths. She glimpsed the life he carried, one of control, precision, and boundaries that most people could neither comprehend nor challenge. And yet, within that rigid order, she sensed traces of loneliness, a longing for something beyond the life he had been forced into. Hours passed in quiet observation, with Lena studying him from a safe distance. She learned small, silent details. The way his hands moved when he checked the locks, the careful efficiency of his eyes scanning every entry point, and the brief moments when he let his guard drop, just enough for the hint of exhaustion to show. She realized that behind the composed exterior was a man who carried immense responsibility, someone whose strength had been forged by necessity and survival. It was in these quiet moments that Lena began to reflect on her own history. She remembered the years of careful rebuilding, the painstaking steps she had taken to regain control over her life. She had learned to trust no one, to rely only on herself. And yet she felt something unfamiliar with Joon, a pull toward understanding, an unspoken connection forged by shared survival and resilience. The next morning brought no relief from the tension. Riverton moved slowly into the day, unaware of the night's events. Lena found herself drawn back to the memory of the gala, the way the corset had constricted her chest and the precision with which Joon had intervened. She realized that, despite the danger, she had felt protected in a way she had never experienced before. That protection was not comfort, not a gesture of romance. It was competence, decisiveness, and power wielded with purpose. And that realization unsettled her more than any threat could. Days passed with cautious contact between them. Every meeting was brief but charged, a mixture of curiosity, fascination, and unspoken recognition. Lena saw flashes of humanity in him, the rare moments when his stern expression softened, the careful gestures that indicated a moral code, and the subtle ways he sought to prevent unnecessary harm. She began to understand the paradox. A man immersed in a dangerous world, yet unwilling to compromise his personal ethics. The shadow of his responsibilities loomed large, however. Lena began to sense the undercurrents of conflict around him. The whispered warnings from his associates, the subtle signals of tension within the organization, and the fleeting moments when his calm veneer threatened to crack. She realized that his world was not one she could fully understand or control, yet she could not stop herself from being drawn in. Their connection deepened subtly but relentlessly. Shared silences became intimate spaces where trust was built. Mutual observation allowed each to read the other's vulnerabilities without words. Lena's confidence in herself grew in response to his presence, and she began to recognize the rare gift of someone who could see her strength while respecting her scars. But just as their bond was forming, the first violent intrusions shattered the fragile stability. Rival factions encroached, testing the limits of Joon's control. Gunfire, threats, and sudden confrontations punctuated the calm. Lena witnessed the peril inherent in his world firsthand, understanding the stakes and realizing that she had been spared not out of kindness alone, but out of necessity. The threats escalated quickly. Her presence, once incidental, became a point of leverage, a potential weakness that rivals could exploit. Joon, always protective, moved decisively, arranging for her to be relocated to a secured cabin outside the city. The separation was abrupt and jarring, leaving Lena to confront fear and isolation while knowing that he was waging a dangerous war to ensure her safety. During the quiet hours alone, Lena reflected on the growing intensity of her feelings. She recognized a mixture of fear, fascination, and trust she had not allowed herself in years. Her past survival instincts urged caution, yet a deeper part of her longed for connection, for the rare understanding that Joon offered without demanding submission. Meanwhile, the world Joon inhabited became increasingly violent. Ambushes, threats, and calculated attacks forced him to take extreme measures to protect both his organization and the woman he had come to care for. Each encounter revealed more about his complex character, the burdens of leadership, the sacrifices made to maintain control, and the rare moments of humanity he allowed himself to display. The night before the first true confrontation, Lena stood at the edge of the cabin, looking out at the quiet forest surrounding her. The wind carried both the scent of pine and the unspoken tension of the city she had left behind. She knew the peace was temporary and that danger would return. Yet she felt a cautious hope, a fragile belief that survival, understanding, and connection were possible even in the shadows of violence. It was in these quiet moments, with the wind whispering through the trees, that she began to grasp the depth of their bond. It was not simple attraction, nor fleeting fascination. It was recognition of shared scars, mutual respect, and the courage to face peril together, even from a distance. And then, as if fate could not resist testing them further, the first violent strike arrived. A convoy of rival operatives descended upon Riverton, threatening everything Joon had worked to protect. Lena's cabin, her temporary refuge, was suddenly a symbol of both vulnerability and defiance. She understood that the quiet she had briefly enjoyed would end, that the man who had saved her once would now require her trust in ways she had never imagined. The final image of the batch lingers. Lena gripping the edge of the cabin railing, heart pounding, the night around her fractured by distant gunfire and sirens, and the knowledge that everything had changed. The world Joon occupied was no longer abstract. It had arrived at her doorstep. If you're already hooked, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because the next part will reveal danger and secrets you won't see coming. The first hints of dawn barely touched the horizon when Lena received word that everything she had tried to leave behind had caught up to her. Riverton, a city that had seemed distant in her brief solitude, was erupting into chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, punctuated by the sharp reports of gunfire. The peaceful cabin, once a haven, became a symbol of both vulnerability and connection to the dangerous world Joon Park had never fully left. Joon's war was no longer confined to whispers in shadowed alleyways. Rival factions had escalated into open conflict, and each strike was calculated to strike fear into his organization. Lena watched helplessly from the forested edge of her temporary refuge, the night pierced by the distant chaos. She understood, more vividly than ever, the stakes of being involved with a man whose life was defined by danger. Despite the distance, Joon remained in control. His presence could be felt in the precision of every countermeasure, the rapid response of his associates, and the rare, fleeting moments when he allowed a pause to catch his breath. But Lena could sense the strain, the weight of leadership that pressed down upon him relentlessly. Even the most disciplined men falter when the burden becomes too great. The first strike came in the form of an ambush on one of his key allies. Explosions rattled nearby streets, and Lena could hear the panicked shouts of civilians mixed with the cold efficiency of his operatives. She realized that the very city she had begun to view as distant was now the arena for a deadly power struggle. Every step of Joon's life, every calculated decision, carried consequences not only for him but for those who depended on him, including her. As the attacks escalated, Lena's worry intensified. Each update, each report from trusted sources painted a clearer picture of the risks Joon faced. The man who had once saved her from the suffocating corset at the gala was now fighting for survival, and there was nothing she could do from the safety of the cabin. The distance was unbearable, yet the separation was essential for her survival. Then the strike she feared most arrived. Joon was critically injured in a violent confrontation with a rival leader. The news hit her like a physical blow. Everything she had feared about his world, everything she had tried to keep at arm's length, was now unavoidable. Her instincts screamed for action, and she found herself racing toward the city, abandoning caution for the first time since their connection began. The hospital was a flurry of controlled chaos. Nurses and doctors moved quickly, guided by urgency and expertise. Lena's heart pounded as she navigated the sterile hallways, her eyes scanning for the one figure she knew she could not lose. When she finally reached his bedside, she found him pale, bandaged, and restrained by tubes and monitors. The stark reality of his life, the danger, the violence, the weight of leadership, hit her with full force. She stayed by his side, silent except for the occasional touch of his hand, which responded with slight, exhausted movements. There was no need for words. The bond forged through shared trauma and silent understanding spoke louder than any conversation could. She realized that their connection was no longer about fascination or curiosity. It was about survival, trust, and the rare comfort of knowing someone truly understood the depths of your life. As Joon's strength returned slowly over days, Lena learned more about the reality of his leadership. He had been forced to make decisions that weighed heavily on his conscience, including ordering the death of a traitor whose actions threatened to bring unimaginable harm to innocents. The cold logic of his world conflicted with the warmth of the connection he had offered her, yet she found herself accepting his humanity, flaws and all. The threat was far from over. Riverton's underworld continued to shift, alliances fractured, and the city remained dangerous. But within the confines of hospital walls and temporary security, Lena and Joon found rare moments of connection. Shared glances, subtle gestures, and silent acknowledgments reinforced the bond that had begun at the gala. The tension of danger only intensified their trust, and the knowledge of mortality sharpened their appreciation for fleeting intimacy. During this period, Lena reflected on her own journey, how she had rebuilt her life after trauma, how she had learned to survive alone, and how this unlikely connection had reawakened her ability to trust. She recognized that love, in its truest form, was not about safety or perfection. It was about vulnerability, courage, and choosing to remain present even when the world threatened to pull you apart. The city outside remained a battleground, but inside they carved a fragile sanctuary. Joon spoke rarely, but each revelation was deliberate. His ambitions to transition the organization into legitimate enterprises, his desire to escape the violent life he had inherited, and his vision for a future where they could exist together beyond the constant threat of danger. Lena absorbed it all, understanding that to love him was to accept the risks, to embrace the complexity of his existence, and to share in both his strength and his burden. Weeks passed. The city slowly stabilized, rival factions weakened, and Joon's organization remained intact. The threat had not disappeared entirely, but the immediate danger had subsided. Lena's return to normalcy was measured, cautious, and deliberate, mirroring the careful approach she had learned in her past life. Yet the bond with Joon had deepened irrevocably, rooted in shared trauma, survival, and the unspoken understanding that they had found something rare amidst chaos. Finally, Joon made the gesture that sealed their bond. He proposed, not with grand fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of someone who understood the weight of life and death. Lena accepted, recognizing that their love was forged in adversity, strengthened by mutual respect, and resilient against the harsh realities surrounding them. 6 months later, their wedding was intimate, yet significant, held in a secure, private location. Friends from their respective lives attended, and the ceremony celebrated survival, resilience, and hope. Joon continued the process of transitioning his organization into legitimate enterprises, signaling a future where their love could exist without constant threat. Together, they stepped into a life defined not by fear, but by commitment, courage, and the ability to breathe freely. The story ends with a vision of Lena and Joon standing side by side, looking out over the city skyline. The past's shadows linger faintly, but the light of dawn reflects their shared determination. The man who had noticed a tight blouse at a gala and offered to save her became the anchor of her life. And together, they moved forward into a world where survival, love, and freedom coexisted. If this story gripped your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Because the next story we share will take suspense and emotion to an entirely new level. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the secure suite, painting Lena's face with a soft, golden glow. The city below was waking, unaware of the battles fought in shadowed streets, the silent strategies executed in quiet offices, and the lives altered by choices made under pressure. For the first time in weeks, Lena could breathe without the weight of imminent danger pressing down on her chest. Yet the memory of that first night at the gala, the corset too tight, the ballroom lights, the sudden, calm intervention, remained vivid. It was not just a memory of fear, but a reminder of the man who had stepped into chaos with a single, decisive act, saving her without fanfare and without expectation. Every detail of that encounter had been etched into her consciousness, from the controlled precision of his movements to the intensity of his gaze, a gaze that seemed to see straight through the layers of her past trauma. Outside, the city moved on, but Lena knew that Riverton's underworld never truly slept. Reports trickled in from loyal associates. Rival factions had been subdued, operations secured, and the organization stabilized. But the tension remained, a taut string ready to snap at any misstep. Every sound, every shadow carried potential danger. Yet within these walls, Lena felt a rare calm. Joon Park's presence radiated control and competence, a protective force that allowed her mind to rest even as the world outside demanded vigilance. Their relationship deepened in silence, in the quiet exchange of glances and the subtle sharing of burdens that words could not capture. Lena observed his care not in overt gestures, but in meticulous attention to detail. The way he double-checked security measures, the precise arrangement of the room to maximize safety, the fleeting moments when exhaustion betrayed the relentless weight of leadership. She recognized the paradox. A man capable of extraordinary violence, yet governed by strict moral limits, unwilling to harm the innocent, yet forced to navigate a world that demanded ruthless choices. Evenings became a sanctuary, each one carefully orchestrated to preserve fleeting moments of normalcy. Lena learned to interpret the smallest of cues, the tilt of his head when planning, the tightening of his jaw when danger loomed, the subtle relaxation when she entered the room. In turn, Joon's rare smiles and unguarded moments provided her with reassurance, a signal that trust was not naive, but earned. The past continued to echo, however. Lena's own history of survival and rebuilding informed every step, reminding her of the delicate balance between courage and self-preservation. Yet she had begun to see that courage could coexist with vulnerability, that trust could be extended cautiously and reciprocated. Her heart, once shielded, began to accept the rare gift of connection, even in a world defined by risk. As Riverton slowly stabilized, Joon turned his focus toward transformation. The organization's violent operations were gradually phased into legitimate business ventures, a strategic evolution signaling hope for a safer future. Lena witnessed his tireless work firsthand, understanding that leadership meant sacrifice, compromise, and relentless determination. His vision was not merely for personal gain, but for the possibility of a life where survival and love could coexist without constant threat. The culmination of their journey came quietly, deliberately. In a private, secure setting, Joon offered Lena a commitment forged in adversity, a promise that transcended fear and uncertainty. The proposal was not grandiose, but it carried the weight of shared experience, resilience, and enduring trust. Lena accepted, fully aware that their union was not the end of struggle, but the affirmation that they would face life's challenges together, unbroken. 6 months later, their wedding was a reflection of their journey. Intimate, secure, and profoundly meaningful. Loved ones who understood the stakes attended, and every detail echoed survival, love, and cautious optimism. The ceremony was not just a celebration of union, but a testament to endurance, hope, and the choice to embrace connection despite life's dangers. Even as they stepped into a future fraught with complexity, the couple carried a shared understanding. Survival was not just about safety, but about courage, moral integrity, and the willingness to love despite imperfection. Lena and Joon's bond was a rare synthesis of strength and vulnerability, proving that two scarred individuals could find sanctuary in each other amidst chaos. As the camera of narration pulls back over the city skyline, the sun rises fully, casting light on a metropolis still alive with shadowed conflict, yet softened by the promise of those who choose hope over fear. Lena and Joon stand side by side, a visual emblem of resilience, unity, and the capacity to breathe freely once again. If this story held your attention from start to finish, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because the next story will push suspense, romance, and emotional intensity even further.